Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with Chabad of Delmar, and together with my co-host Mark Ronich of Statewide News Service and JBizTechPhilly.com, we have a very, very special guest with us, Sir James Milstein. He's the Albany County Public Defender. So, Mr. Milstein, welcome to the Jewish View. We're very happy and honored that you come on our show.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be
Jim,
here.
thank you for taking the time. This is really, for me, it's very special that you're here, because I always like to see when someone
You need a lawyer, Lamar?
when someone's Jewish in a public venue, that it's important that we're just not an all Irish or Dutch city, that we do have a variety of other ethnicities and cultures within the city of Albany. And it's nice to see that. So I'm glad that you took on the challenge of being the county public defender.
Jim Wells, why don't you start from your background, why you did even your background and leading up to why you did become a public defender?
Well, one of the reasons, originally, I grew up in the city of Albany and was raised and went to Albany Public Schools, School 19 Hackett, Albany High School, went away to college, came back to go to Albany Law School. During that time, when I grew up, my father was an attorney in Albany, and always had great admiration for him and the relationships that he developed with clients in particular. Unfortunately, soon after I passed the bar, my father, our plan was I would be going to practice with him and my sister, who was an attorney.
Sue Milstein.
Susan, yes.
Okay.
And soon after, right after I passed the bar, received notice I passed the bar, my father became very sick and died a short time thereafter.
And what was his name?
Jay.
Jay. Okay.
So as a result, while I was in law school, I interned with the Albany County Public Defender's Office because my father had given me the advice that, number one, it's good to give back to the community, and secondly, it was a great experience because you could get because the caseload was so great, you would get a lot of experience that you might not get as just being a summer intern in a private law firm, because back then and continuing today, if you're a second or third year law student, you can get an internship and get a provisional admittance to the bar to work under the supervision of attorneys. So in my second and third year of law school, I worked a number of hours each year with the public defender's office in local courts and working on trials and working on appeals. And I just enjoyed the work. I enjoyed the relationship with the clients. I enjoyed the pace that was involved in it. And after I became admitted, that was something I continued for almost 25, 26 years.
You never left. You interned and then you never left.
And then I never left. And ultimately, in 2011, when my predecessor received an appointment to a different position.
Was it a judgeship?
It was to head of the Professional Standards Commission.
Okay.
I put in my resume to the county executive and fortunately was appointed.
You know, one of the questions...
And confirmed by the county legislature.
And confirmed by the county legislature.
And your salary is $106,000? Or
Yes.
that's what it was back then? Or
Right, it's about $108,000.
Okay.
You know, you say the caseload, and again, I'm talking like I always say from just a man in the street, because I'm not a lawyer. I'm a rabbi, so I know rabbinical law, but not the regular law. And but I just read once that the caseload is incredible that's put on these lawyers. You know, people think, oh, I have one case and I'll work on it for a week, and I just heard it's
How many cases a year do you do?
Well,
Does the office?
Our office handles approximately 10,000 criminal cases a year that we open.
And
we also have about another 1,100 cases that we handle down in family court. People forget about our family court office, but we do a lot of work there as well.
And how many attorneys are in your office?
We have 28 attorneys, 2 of which are primarily working on appeals, 4 of whom are in Albany County Family Court, and the rest handle the
Let me ask you, what would be a case, just a typical case of a family court that someone needs a public defender?
If
I mean,
there-
a divorce, we don't
We
get
don't do
into a
divorces,
divorce.
we don't do, but if there's an allegation of parental neglect or abuse or issues involving custody, changing of parental rights, then that is considered to be a
And
significant
if they don't have
right.
money, they could say, I
can-
need a public defender.
Correct.
Oh, that's
So
interesting, I didn't know that.
are you still in Albany? Do you still live in Albany?
In Albany County, yes.
In Albany County, you're a Delmartian, or where are you? Somewhere?
In the Bethlehem, Guilderland area.
Oh, okay, oh, okay. So that's, that's good schools there, and you brought your family up there, and,
That's correct.
okay. And what's been your experience over the past few years as the county public defender as opposed to when you were the assistant public defender?
Well-
What changes have you seen?
Well, I think the changes that I've seen is in the economic climate, in the financial climate that all governments, whether school districts, county, state governments, find themselves in, especially since the recession, is the mantra is, how can you do more with less? And we have fewer attorneys now than we did 4 or 5 years ago, yet we have approximately the same number of cases. So for our office, a lot of times it's trying to develop what is the most efficient and effective way to deliver legal services to our indigent clients.
What about plea bargaining? I mean, most cases are plea bargained, aren't they? I mean, you
That's-
can't go to trial with 10,000 cases. It's
No,
impossible.
no. Most cases are resolved through plea bargaining process, and that's not just in Albany County, but nationally. And you're looking at well over 95 to probably 98% of the cases are resolved through plea bargain negotiations.
Do you like that type of system? Because there are other people who, I know that it would slow down the courts, but just theoretically, do you like the type of system we have today, where you plea bargain 98% of the cases?
I think you have to play with the cards you're dealt. And I think under the system that we have, with the number of people that are arrested, the number of people are charged, what would be the alternative? The alternative would be how many more, it wouldn't just be public defenders. How many more judges would you need? How many more jail cells would you need if people are going to be held for periods of time that they can't make bail? After that, how frequently are you going to have trials? And if you have all these trials, where are you going to get all these jurors to come out on a regular basis to listen to all of these cases? So I think this is not something that just evolved in 5 years. This is something that's been going on for 50 or probably a lot longer than anything I've ever remembered.
I always do this on the show. I always try to relate a TV show with reality. But how close is Law and Order to reality, or Law and Order SVU, or Law and Order, the original one? They have so many different types. And how close is Perry Mason back from the 50s to today's? I mean, I never saw Perry Mason plea bargain a case.
Right. Well, for television purposes, the plea bargaining process is not something that you would say, oh, this makes a great show.
But
What
they
makes
do
a great
it in
show
Law
is-
and Order, because the district attorney
Right.
says, oh, I can't, I'm going to be strung up in an election year, I can't let this case go to trial, you have to plea bargain this, we got to get this out of here, and they talk about it on TV as a script, but I don't know if that's true in reality generally, and not necessarily Albany County, but just generally.
I would say there's more of a formality to
Okay.
plea bargaining. It depends on the types of cases. It depends on the seriousness of the case.
Right.
There is a negotiation that can sometimes start as soon as a person is arrested, because let's say a particular client is caught red-handed, and the issue is not going to be what is going to be whether this person is going to be found guilty or not guilty. What are they really trying to determine? What's my sentence going to be? And to a large degree, plea bargaining is sentence bargaining. Am I going to go to jail? Am I going to be placed on probation? What are the consequences of a plea? Suppose you're not a United States citizen. Will I be deported? Suppose I have a nursing license or an education license. Will that be taken from me, so I will no longer be able to support my family and have a job if I am convicted of an offense that may not seem to be the most significant crime to society in general.
Right.
So as a result, that is something that people look at. District attorneys, good defense attorneys, whether they're public defenders or private attorneys. Everyone is engaged in that process, and you're trying to put your client in the best light to give the best explanation. Sometimes it's the reason why the person is in the criminal justice system. Sometimes it may be as a result of substance abuse. Sometimes it may be the result of their background or lack of employment. And what sometimes you would try to do is to be somewhat of a social worker to try and help clients so that they don't end up back in the criminal justice system again, and that they can go on and lead productive lives. And
why do you go to the Albany County Jail? To visit an inmate that's,
yes.
If they're already an inmate, then they've been convicted.
Not necessarily,
so
no.
Tell us about that.
Right. The first step in any criminal proceeding is called an arraignment. At an arraignment, a person is advised of their charges and advised by the court, and advised that if they are unable to afford an attorney, one would be appointed to them. If they are indigent, and the court makes that determination, then our office would be appointed to represent that individual for the culmination of the case. Now, the next thing the court has to decide is whether or not bail should be set on a person. If a court determines a person based on the seriousness of the charges, the strength of the case, the potential sentence the individual faces, his ties to the community, his family ties, his employment, his criminal history, if that person is considered a risk, then the judge might set bail. If the judge sets bail, then the person goes to the Albany County Jail until the conclusion of his case.
And that's when you go visit to develop your case for this person.
Right, to meet the client for a variety of reasons.
And there's a separate room, private room that you can talk. You don't have
there's
to talk
conference rooms. Right.
In the major, okay.
One of the things actually we've also implemented in the last couple of years is we now have set up video conference capabilities between ourselves and the jail, so we can set up appointments to visit, to talk with a client.
It makes your time more efficient.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because the jail's out by the airport.
I mean, like I said, I'm a rabbi and I'm not the lawyer, but on the other hand, I do advise people or come to us for a last resort.
But you also visit the county jail,
yeah,
the
that's
state
what I'm
jail.
saying. I go to prisoners, and sometimes they have to work with lawyers, but you're right, lawyers sometimes, that a person did something wrong when they're drinking or they're on drugs. Now, do they need jail or do they need rehabilitation? So, in a certain sense, that's why I say a rabbi, I'm a social worker, and that's why, I relate when you say that a lawyer, you have to be almost like a social worker. I mean, certain things are obviously totally criminal. A guy goes with a gun and shoots somebody, but, did they do something wrong because they were on drugs? Maybe they need to go to a rehabilitation center. And the society would be better off. They don't have to pay $60,000 plus to keep the guy incarcerated, or maybe this person needs a little bit more help and could become a normal citizen. So it's interesting, like all these professionals. Like I always say, I'm sometimes like I put a social worker hat on, but even a lawyer that has to deal with these issues also.
Did you ever have a case where someone couldn't afford an attorney, was assigned to your office, and you knew the person?
And I knew the person?
Yeah, where you had to recuse. Do you have to recuse yourself?
No, I wouldn't have to recuse myself if I knew people. And having been around the community for a number of years, I do know a number of people.
Bad things happen to good people.
So, right. Yeah. And sometimes they're not the worst. They may be driving with a suspended license. And, and I had one person who, when my children were younger, I coached the soccer team. And this boy was on my soccer team when he was 6 or 7 years old, and I think his worst punishment for coming to court is having to see me, because he was like, I can't believe you're my lawyer, you're my soccer coach. And so he was more embarrassed by the whole situation than anything else. But it also, that familiarity was very helpful because he trusted me. He knew me.
And that's an important factor.
And that's probably one of the most important goals we always try to attain, which is to try and earn a client's trust.
Now, what's the financial level? Because when you say if you can't afford one, one will be. So afford means money. So what's the financial level that someone couldn't afford an attorney? Because attorney rates, private rates are very high.
Right.
And practically no one could really afford an attorney's rate. So.
Well, people do, and if they come up to these unexpected times, people try to garnish funds from family and friends if necessary to hire an attorney if they can. And obviously we try to encourage people if they have the ability to hire an attorney. But it's, first of all, it's up to the judges. We give them a schedule based on, which is the federal poverty standards to use as a guideline. But judges are going to interpret different people differently, because it's one thing to say to someone if they're released on their own recognizance and they're facing a petty larceny charge, which is a misdemeanor, and they say, okay, you can go out, come back in 3 weeks or a month from now and have an attorney with you. And if they don't, we're going to give you another month and now come back with another attorney, because there's really not a time pressure on the case. However, if that person is charged with petty larceny and is remanded to the county jail in lieu of $5,000 bail, then we pretty much would be automatically appointed, because they would assume that the fact the person's in jail can't come up with money. At least at the initial stages of the proceeding, they want that person to be represented by an attorney. They don't want a person to sit in jail for 2 or 3 weeks and be unrepresented. So we have an attorney who's assigned to the jail to make sure we interview people within a day of when they're
say, if he has money, he probably would get out. No one's just
right.
Sick. Can I give a little? It's a Jewish view, so I have to give a little bit of the Gemara. I have the little Talmud. So it's the Jewish people. We just came from Passover. It's a Passover story. The Jewish people are ready to get out of Egypt. It's a real story, and from the Talmud. And God says, "Wait a minute. I promised Abraham that you're going to be a slave, but you're going to come out with a lot of gold and silver. So you're going to have to wait here a few more days in Egypt." And the Jewish people said, "We'd rather just get out today, forget about the money, we would do anything to get out of jail." So God says, "No, I made a promise, so you're going to stay here in Egypt for a few more days until you gather the gold and silver." So you're right. I mean, that would be the idea, the logic behind it. If anybody had any money, they're not going to just sit there in jail and wait a few weeks. If, hey, I have the money, let me out of here already.
But it's interesting, even if people potentially have the money, once you're in jail and your freedom is taken away, certain things are taken away as well. You may say, well, I can make a phone call. Well, what if you try to make a phone call and the person doesn't answer the one time you have a chance to make a phone call? And that's one of the roles we can also play, because people say, I can't get a hold of someone. And we can assist them in that.
You mentioned the priority of getting your own attorney. But that doesn't mean that getting your own attorney is going to be a better attorney than what you have at the public defender's office. I don't want to leave anyone with the impression that you have second-rate attorneys there. I mean, you have some really qualified and expert folks in your public defender's office.
We do. And historically in Albany County, and I've been with the office now for 30 years, we've always had a reputation of having some of the finest local attorneys be in the Albany County Public Defender's Office. A number of our former assistant public defenders and public defenders became judges and went on to other positions of great prominence. And I'm very proud to have come from that background and that tradition. And one of the things
sometimes I'd rather have a public defender who's really good.
One of the things we do is we know our courts.
Yes.
We know our system. I mean, we haven't talked about necessarily how we handle all these cases. There are several courts within Albany County. Mm-hmm. There's a county court that handles felonies. Right. There's a city court where cases originate in the city of Albany. But there are also 17 other town, village, and city courts within Albany County that we have to cover anytime they're in session. So we have attorneys that have spent a number of years in a local court. Probably, I've been in Guilderland Court now for probably 28 or 29 years. I have more experience in Guilderland Court than any of the district attorneys. I've probably gone through, I kept the list a number of years ago. I don't remember what it stopped at. And so you have familiarity, you have an understanding of the law enforcement, the court, how the court system operates. So yes, it can be actually a tremendous advantage to have one of our attorneys represent you because of the knowledge,
Right.
institutional knowledge and
it's
experience.
And it's your tax dollars at work having you represent. So I would say maybe you're getting a better deal by having a public defender represent you in Albany County than having to pay for your own attorney.
Right. And we're very cautious of that as well. It's not frequent, but sometimes we'll hear people hedge and say, well, can you hire an attorney? Well, I want to see what your offer is going to be first. and we're like, no, it doesn't work that way. That's exactly what's not going to happen, and they want to play it off.
I'd like to talk about crime, because once you said 30 years, have you seen the level of crime or the vicious crimes in those 30 years, any difference, or it's like life goes on, there's always going to be crime and same old, or is there a difference in level?
I would say yes, there's a difference. From 30 years ago, if you said there was a shooting in Albany, it would be, wow, that's a real
Big
I
news.
think
big
you got
news.
to go back further, because
Yeah.
I was around 30 years ago, and they had the Pine Hills Toucher and the Pine Hills Molester, and they had other things going on.
I'm not saying they didn't
It
always
was
have serious
still,
crime, but the number of gun-related incidents
Right.
has
increased
significantly
dramatically, yes.
in the last, I don't know, if you say 10 years or so.
Right.
The use now of opiates, in particular heroin,
Right.
has become a very scary epidemic in Albany County. And people are becoming aware of the problems that entails. In fact, last week I was at part of a committee that the County Executive McCoy established to have various departments try to pool their resources to come up with some solutions to this heroin problem that's confronting Albany County, not just from a criminal justice standpoint, but from a public health standpoint as well. And he brought in people, the head of the Office of Mental Health, the health department, social services, because all of these places are integrated into trying to come up with an educational program to get out the word about the danger of heroin to parents and mostly to children at a younger age, and also to try and assist people who are dealing with these issues before, so they would become involved in the criminal justice system.
What gut-wrenching stories do you have that really you look at this and you go, it's a wasted life, and oh my gosh, I can't believe, that this is happening. We need to represent this person, and it's probably, I know of someone who told me a story of how someone's in the Albany County Jail and they're already planning their next, when they get out, their next crime, because they want to be in jail because it's a set routine, a set pattern for them. But they also, there's a lot of recidivism rate in the county, just sort of like round up the usual suspects almost. But I was just wondering about, like you had a story of someone in Guilderland that pled guilty to second-degree manslaughter and driving while ability impaired, and the plea bargain, I forgot what the plea bargain was, but, it was this Sassiano Suda case, and that was also an illegal immigrant, and there was a plea bargain. I don't know if the person went back to his home country, or not, but you know what case I'm talking
Right.
about.
That was a sad case, and that was a number of years ago, but my memory serves me
07.
correctly. It was two individuals who were friends with one another.
Right.
And one of the real tragedies of these vehicular crimes is there are sometimes individuals who are innocent victims who have no relation and they're just driving down a road and are unfortunately injured or killed by a person driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs.
Right.
But then there's also situations where people who might even be related are in the car together, and the remorse that the survivor feels, the driver, because his best friend has been killed, is almost a punishment that this person's going to have to live with for the rest of their lives, and no amount of imprisonment is going to change how that affects not only him, but his relationship with his family members and friends in the community.
So what was the outcome of that? Do you remember, or should I look?
I believe it ended up being resolved in a plea bargain, and the individual ended up going to state prison.
State prison, and 3.5 to 7 years in state prison.
Right.
Now, what's your relationship with aside from not the individual, what's your relationship to the district attorney's office?
Okay.
Are you adversaries?
Yes.
Okay.
In the criminal justice system, it's an adversarial relationship, just like anything else in the legal profession. And the district attorney prosecutes all the cases on behalf of, their title is the people of the state of New York.
Right.
And they prosecute people who are arrested, for the most part, in Albany County. The individual who's accused of the crime would either be represented by our office, or if they hire a private attorney, or if there's a conflict with our office, it would go to either a conflict defender or potentially assigned to an outside attorney.
So do you, off hours, do you get together with people in the district attorney's office and you're friendly and you build a rapport, and then when you're in court, all all bets are off and you're adversarial? I mean, like I'm talking about like maybe baseball teams, you get on the field
Right.
and you're
Well,
got to play against each other.
we absolutely have to play against each other.
Yeah.
We have what I hope would be a common goal, which is the pursuit of justice. So we want to come to a fair and equitable resolution for all cases. We want people to leave the criminal justice system thinking that not because of income level or race or religion, that they're being treated as fairly as another person is. So we all have that as a common goal. What we think is fair and appropriate for a plea bargain and a sentence, we may differ tremendously on. How we interpret the facts of a case may be significantly different. But depending on the prosecutor, we usually have very good relations with the people. We deal with them in a professional fashion.
If your assistant doesn't get along with the assistant DA, where you can't come to an agreement, do you pick up the phone and call the DA and say, hey, look, let's bump this up, let's talk to each other about this, and let's try to resolve this?
I don't think I've ever
Okay.
had done that.
Just thought I'd ask.
I mean, I think in life there's going to be all different types of people.
Right.
There's going to be people you get along with, people you don't get along with, and you have to learn to work with all different types of people.
When you do a plea bargain, the judge doesn't have to agree with the plea bargain, even though
Right.
you and the district attorney's office agree. The
Right.
judge could squash that or change it.
That's correct.
Okay, just want to make sure. Do you have a favorite judge? Do you have a...
Yeah.
Can't ask that. We got a
Yeah,
minute left, so I thought I'd leave that one.
Teen
I'm sorry.
figures, I would think that if they're in the high 90s, that they're reconciling and plea bargaining, that obviously there's a high percentage surprise.
98%.
Yeah, so they're getting together one way or the other. I mean, so the numbers don't lie, just that obviously everybody has to agree to it.
Right, and especially when you think about the criminal justice system, you're thinking about numbers, because you're watching Law and Order and thinking of these are major rape cases, and there are major cases. But when you go to Colony Town Justice Court or Albany City
Right.
Court, and you see the number of cases that are petty larcenies or assaults in the third degrees or interfamily spats, these are cases that need to be resolved in a quick and efficient manner, if at all possible. And that's where most of the cases really in the criminal justice system
And
come from.
I know we got to go, but I also noticed that the public defenders and DA's office, they get they get up there first to get their cases out of the way first.
No, that's not
To
true.
let you get out, for the most part, I mean.
No, that's not, actually, it's just the exact
It's just the opposite?
Because,
Really? Okay.
because we're there to the end of court.
You are?
So
Okay.
usually, a lot of the judges will try and get the private attorneys out first because
Oh,
they know that
okay.
we handle, let's say, approximately 70% of the calendar in a lot of these courts.
Well, there
So
you
we're
go.
going to be there till the
You can
judge
see
closes
how
court.
unfamiliar I am with the town courts. I've been clean.
Right.
All right, we want to thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. Yes.
Jim,
My
for
pleasure.
being on the Jewish View, and you're doing the good work for the good people of Albany County, and we wish you many years of success with
Yes.
good health.
Thank you very much.